the geopolitical interests of the U.S. will be served whether or not USAID is on its own or under State Department. I can guess if I was State Department, I wouldn't want that burden to
it's
have
too much. Yeah.
It's too much. But in a sense, it doesn't matter, because if you fold an agency that doesn't have any staff, what are you really giving to the State Department? It's just some computers and chairs. So yeah, it's USAID being out of the picture absolutely hurts USAID strategic interests, and that's why it doesn't fit. The ambassadors here, what they may say to the new government in the US may be different from what they feel, but I would say most ambassadors feel like, hey, we need this USAID here to do all this HIV work so we can help the government do some of the things it needs to get done, but with our money, and everybody's happy.
This is the Policy Digest, a Center for Policy Analysis podcast that explores how African societies are governed and how people and their leaders are shaping the future of their communities. Through candid conversations and insightful analysis, we aim to provide a deeper understanding of the political, economic, and social landscape of Africa. So sit back, relax, and get ready to explore the diverse and dynamic world of African governance.
Hello, my name is Joseph, and I'm the host of the Policy Digest. And we are going to have a long chat about the global impact of USAID, which has underwent drastic changes ever since President Trump came into office. And a lot has been happening. If you've been following Elon Musk's Twitter with the Department of Government Efficiency and all, you've been noting quite a lot of external stresses that have also led to a lot of structural changes. But just to start you off with some bit of context. So around Feb 4th, I stumbled on an article on LinkedIn, and this title was An Obituary for USAID, an icon for global development by Ryan Voter.
Yeah.
And it starts by saying, USAID has passed away this weekend from administrative causes.
Administrative causes, that's right.
It is with a heavy heart that we acknowledge the passing of USAID. I will leave a link such that you are able to get it. But a number of things happen with USAID website going offline, USAID payment systems going offline, the removal of USAID seals from its DC headquarters, its sublimation into the State Department. So it's an obituary, really, for USAID by this very, very, very passionate writer, I think. So in order for us to forward into this conversation, we are hosting Nicholas Demeter.
Yeah.
You're most welcome to the Policy Digest podcast. We are happy to have you. So
Please be here.
Nicholas Demeter is a seasoned expert in business development, proposal writing, and activity management. If you just go to his LinkedIn, he has a great deal of experience with a strong focus on monitoring, evaluation, research, and learning, or MERL in short. Currently, at the moment, he's pioneering the localization hub in Uganda, and this is local for dev. If still you go to LinkedIn, you'll find that work, and supports the Center for Policy Analysis as a business development advisor. In the past, he's worked on political economy, fundraising advisory, and setting up monitoring and evaluation systems for some of the largest development programs. And he's worked with USAID before, and he'll be speaking more about that with RTI and various global organizations working in governance, democracy promotion, and advancing efficiency in the administration of development work. You're most welcome, Nicholas, and we are really, really happy to have you. So I just, since this is about USAID, I wanted you to tell us about maybe the work you did with USAID in a minute, and we see how we get started on that.
Very good. Well, I should have you introduce me at all my parties. It certainly sounds impressive, this person you're talking about. Thank you again for having me. It's an honor to be here. Great work this organization does, and we're happy to have CEPA as a founding partner of Localization for Development. Before getting into that, maybe talk about my work with USAID. So after working in the field and at headquarters, really all angles of development, I had an opportunity to work with USAID here in Uganda as a MERL advisor for the Office of Education, Youth and Child Development. So one office within USAID Uganda. And I was there for a year, but it was extended, and then another 2 years, so about 4 years in all. Plus there was a year during COVID, which was very odd, where I was teleworking from the US, waking up at 4 a.m. And
Are you a citizen?
Yes. Yeah, I'm from Ohio, Dayton, Ohio, originally.
Do you vote?
Some of the crowd. I did, but my home residence is Washington, D.C., which is very, very, very democratic. So, plus it's not really a state. But in any case, I had my vote for the popular vote, and yeah.
Oh, that's good. I will not ask who you voted.
No, what's important is people vote. There were issues with the previous election. This one was pretty definitive, though. So,
yeah.
And we're thankful that there wasn't any aftermath
problem.
Yeah, it was a very proper handover.
Yeah, smooth. Okay, better than last time, I guess.
Yeah.
Maybe just to also start us off. So, can you give us a bit of a history about USAID? How was it incepted as a development program,
Sure.
and what does it do at its heart?
Yeah. Well, USAID was founded during the tenure of JFK, John F. Kennedy. So whether he was the policy designer or whether he signed it into law, but it was established over 60 years ago. And the mission, whether it changed from USAID Forward or local, currently it's localization, but in between you had Journey to Self-Reliance and Local Works for Local Solutions. So there's all kinds of themes based on the incumbent government, but it all is mostly the same, which is, and in John F. Kennedy's speech, when he announced it, there were a lot of words related to self-sustainability and hinting at, we aren't intending to be here to support these many countries, because the intention was to work in any poor country, any country that needed help. So to set up mini colonialist operations was not the theme of the day, obviously. So from the beginning, its intent was to localize. But the system that built around USAID over the years sort of changed that direction. And USAID's tried consistently to get back to it.
Restructuring itself to meet the goals of its founding fathers.
Yeah, exactly. And the intention has always been pure to try to come back to that. But bureaucracies are tricky,
Yes.
We have to give them a break sometimes because, now that I've been inside the machine, I can tell you there's some very dedicated people trying very hard to do good, but paperwork is paperwork wherever you are. And my time here in Uganda, I've gotten to know Ugandan bureaucracy quite a bit. Working with different ministries, you don't have your shortage of paperwork either. But
yeah. Every nation has its.
But these are checks.
Share of bureaucracy. Maybe just to get us to understand. So you said from the very beginning, intended to localize, to promote
more or less
self-sufficiency. So it was not supposed to stay forever. It was supposed to provide support.
No. And in fact, the initial staffing structure was that USAID did the work. There were no implementing partners. That came later when streamlining government and efficiency, and that encouraged the use of contractors, and then that developed. In my sector specifically, MERL was largely done by a few organizations, but at the time, this was during USAID Forward, there were two needs. One, to recognize the importance of data and using it to inform decision-making at USAID. This is Clinton era, I believe. So, and there was also a pressure from the small business community to say, hey, there's all these big companies in here and organizations doing all this Save the Children and Care, or Chemonics, DAI, but what about the small groups? And so they kind of let these two factors that were pressing against USAID develop into an entire market by promoting and giving incentives for small businesses.
Yeah, to thrive.
Women-owned small business, veteran-owned small business, disabled veteran-owned small business, what's called a hub zone, which means you put your office in a developing part of the city. So if that's where your location is. So as many of those boxes you tick off, there became a flourishing of monitoring, evaluation, research, and learning operations.
Yeah, you say that's quite a body of free data and
yeah,
that I think is locally accessible. But just to
just to finish my loop, is that that is what eventually became a challenge with USAID, because it was evaluating its own activities, meaning the funds that were coming from the U.S. were going back to the U.S. to fund evaluators to come here. And after working with USAID for 4 years, I was very impressed with the evaluators locally. But despite what you may put into a contract or an agreement saying you must build the local capacity,
the practice is different.
The practice is very different.
So what happened from them wanting to, let's say, localize and get, let's say, most funding in local hands, to the bureaucracy being the one that is benefiting most from, away from the general impact for the activity and the grassroots in terms of the consumption of the core resources, especially from a technical perspective?
Yeah. I wouldn't say I'm an expert. I was there for 4 years, and I had a lot of questions when I got in, and I didn't have as many questions when I left. But my guess is that it's in lockstep with the staffing, right? So there's another agency. It works closely with USAID, but it is its own entity, PEPFAR.
Oh, yes.
And PEPFAR has abundance of funding because of its mandate. And with that funding comes staffing resources. So when you have the staff to monitor different activities, whether it's local monitoring, staff monitoring, whatever, you can trust that entity more because you have eyes on it. The rest of USAID, or USAID proper, doesn't have those resources. So you have the contracts office, which is ultimately responsible for any activity that goes out. They can only manage so many awards and of so much size. So say you have $100,000 or $100 million to spend, excuse me.
Yeah, say like on 100 nonprofits. Yeah,
you could do one award and encourage them to use what are called grants under contract and sub-grant to local organizations. And that would be one entity you have to monitor, right?
That is monitoring on your behalf.
And is monitoring on your behalf. Or you could do 1 million local grants, which would require a lot more human resources.
M&E, yes.
To and not just that, but just contracts people that can push the paper and make things happen. And for every activity that's out there, there is an agreements officer or a contracts officer that's liable for that money, literally legally liable. If it's misappropriated, they can be technically face
court or prison because of that.
That's never happened, but just that concern is there. So with USAID shifting to, less in-house work and relying more on external organizations and contractors, that sector just blossomed, and it kind of ran away with the original mission of USAID to help the local organizations. So
build capacity and thrive beyond USAID's presence.
Yeah.
So I've been monitoring social media, especially with DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency.
DOGE.
I think most people at the moment have USAID in like bad light, but I'm the skeptic who knows that USAID has probably done some good work. Yeah. Is that like one shining, clear example of the work that USAID is doing? Or I don't think it's one. There must be so many. Any glaring impact which perhaps you can refer to,
well,
or two or three?
Again, it's not USAID, but we work closely with them as PEPFAR. I mean, PEPFAR is a huge success, which is probably why it gets the most funding. 60% of the money from PEPFAR goes to local organizations. So we're trying to get in USAID Uganda to 25%. That's everything but PEPFAR, essentially. And it's a challenge. But PEPFAR has those resources, and resources beget resources. So it's a shining example of what the right amount, the necessary and sufficient human time, people, and money, right? So you need all three of those to effectively run good programs. So PEPFAR had it. So it's successful. And I'd say where you had this level of funding, it's people at the end of the day, right? You had maybe an agreement officer, a contracts. Agreement officer is for grants, contracts officer is for contracts. So you maybe had a contract or a grant. Both do great work. Doesn't matter the mechanism. But you had an inspired team to design the activity, and they did due diligence to really think about what's the best for that country in question. You had adequate funding, meaning they didn't try to cover the whole country with their activity. They maybe piloted it and took it step by step. It's usually when there's maybe overambitious leadership that comes in, and there's a constant turnover at USAID. So it's just human nature to want to put your stamp on something. So new people, new ideas, recycle. They don't usually recycle the old ideas. So there's good to that, and there's bad to that. I know that the government here in its localization actually has a similar rotation policy at the local level, which
ensures talent is moving around. And I know you work with USAID specifically in M&E, which means you were in touch with data, real data of the impact that USAID is doing. Do you want to point us to some of that data? Or I think you've worked also in many, many countries. I looked at your LinkedIn.
Yeah, but USAID is where I I definitely saw the most data. So while I was there, they launched the DIS, the Development Information Systems. So this had been a long time coming, is to consolidate all global USAID data to
just
determine impact.
Port,
yeah. And so we pivoted to that. So we're able to look at the mission as a whole. So evidence of impact is just as important as evidence of no impact. And this is where, if we could go back and change things, I don't know how you would institute it. Your CEO, Timothy Chimongas, said to me, we were talking about bringing my motorcycle into his boardroom. He said, "It's okay. It's a safe space here." Right. So the safe space is important. If an organization, and there was a period here in Uganda where that safe space was strong, but it was individuals that brought that made that happen. And when there was that safe space, people felt comfortable to say, this isn't working. This report says we should pivot, and failure is not a bad word. Wayne Voda is a friend of mine, and we've organized a few events together. One that he pioneered, and I hope he brings back, is Fail Fest. And it was an annual event
in
Washington, D.C. that brought the donor community and USAID to come and talk about the failures.
What failed, right?
Right. And it wasn't like we passed out 1 million cell phones to farmers so they could get prices on current agricultural prices. But they went to the black market. So we lost it. It was, it wasn't like that happened, but it indirectly spurred the local economy. So it was actually a success. Now, they had to be real failures. So once a year, you got to hear real stories.
Development partners. This period, I've heard of I think like the failure museum. Like if you did a product and just put it there, let people learn from your failures.
Absolutely.
Right?
I fail all the time with AI. I'm a big failure. The more I learn, the more I fail. And I press the limits of it. And so whenever I can, I encourage that. So it becomes commonplace. To see what worked, what didn't, so that it's not such a fear.
And I think that's the L in the MERL.
Yeah.
Yeah, it started as monitoring and evaluation, then...
Actually, Wayne and I coined the term MERL because there was MEAL, MEL, M&E, and at the time he said, what acronym? I said MERL, R. The R is very important. In hindsight, it doesn't really matter.
What does R mean?
R means research, right?
So M is...
monitoring, then evaluation, research, and then learning.
Wow, that's good.
Well, it's a lot for any one entity, one person to do. First of all, if you're an evaluator, you're not monitoring. So you really can't call yourself the M.
The E.
Right. So you're Earl, or you could just be doing the learning part, in which case you can't put the other acronyms. So in the end, it doesn't really matter. Why it's important here is because it's tied to localization. So we stress the R with localization for development and our partners because that is an area of MERL products that USAID has not typically used. And that includes political economy analysis, systems mapping, things that require a deep knowledge of the local context. There's even local context analysis. These are great tools to use before you design an activity so that you know that this education activity that stresses, early grade reading, right? It's a great strategy and philosophy because meaning basically you teach a child in its local language for the first 3 years, and then you teach English because it'll be easier to learn English. It's
or any other subject.
Yeah, it's a proven, tested theory. However, sometimes that doesn't work, Uganda or otherwhere, because external factors get in the way, things that aren't in a controlled environment.
Yeah, so maybe just to ask.
Sure.
With USAID having this body of data and investing quite a lot in monitoring, evaluation, learning, reconfiguring their systems. How come they had missed to change themselves? Are they not responding to data? Are they doing it for the sake of doing it? How come it has become a bureaucracy which is not evolving?
Well, it goes a little bit back to this staffing issue and the turnover, right? It's further compounded by something I originally thought was a very good thing about USAID that I never knew. We on the outside thought that you just needed to know somebody at USAID. If you knew the mission director or an office director, you could get your award. And there's nothing further from the truth. The process to designing, to soliciting, and then awarding is so secretive that I have had people working across from me, and I had no idea they were involved on a committee that was designing something. And it's the same with staff. I didn't know you were hiring so-and-so and it's usually for another office or something. So they really keep that separate. So there's no question of whether the process was tainted or something. So this was very impressive to me, and I very much appreciate it. Part of it was due to concerns of risk, because if you spend a year hiring someone, and it can take up to a year, then you have the security clearance and what. You don't want to do that again. So you don't want someone saying, hey, it wasn't fair. You hired him because of X, Y, Z, and you didn't consider these other Ugandan candidates or these other candidates. So, and that happens much more in procurements. So with organizations. So some organization spends $100,000 chasing after a $100 million award, and they think it was unfairly awarded because of maybe an impression that they had a connection to,
or invested
right?
so much upfront. Yes.
Yeah, and when you spend money, you get very invested in that. So there would be protests all the time. And I remember when I was in Iraq, and two contractors, Louis Berger and might have been RTI, were conflicted over. I think Louis Berger didn't win, and it was protesting, and USAID eventually just canceled the activity. So there was
even the one who had won the contract,
because they couldn't agree, they couldn't come to terms. So USAID said the best thing to do is to kill it.
Yeah,
which is not supposed to
bad
happen.
Business.
It's about the people that we're trying to help, not which organization gets the money.
Wins the contract or not.
And that happens between nonprofits and for-profits. It doesn't. It's just the system.
Just a competitive world, right?
Very competitive. Very competitive. So that's the system. There's a second thing that I learned only when working there that I was also impressed with, which is how individuals are given promotions, that they make it up the ladder. And that was also highly secretive. Your boss, your supervisor, is not involved in deciding that. I've never heard that before.
They don't even make a recommendation. They monitor your data as an individual.
I mean, sure, there's feelings that you can get from someone, but if a supervisor was to in any way interfere, they'd have to start it over, and it would just be a very tight, non-transparent, but for the right reasons, process that's documented and could be audited if there were any concerns. So staff are encouraged in that process, though, because of the way it's designed, to achieve something, to start and achieve something within a calendar year. And if it stretches over a 4-year period, which is approximately your time at post, although some posts like Pakistan, it's like a year, so you gotta, if you want to be promoted, you have to come in,
things done,
get something done. And it doesn't encourage collaboration, because if you work together with another team, it's not as good as being at your own initiative. So that encourages a lot of the Americans coming in to want to start something new and not pick up where the old person left off, because they didn't start that. Now, this may be...
Because they have their own KPIs too.
Exactly. And this may be an assumption within the USAID staff community that's not real. And either way, it needs to be clarified, because the impression I got is that this prevented a lot of collaboration. I'm not saying it was
and change from one party to another.
I saw great activities that that were during COVID, and they would have worked if it wasn't for COVID, because it needed a personal touch, and we were all, just dark screens.
Because there's no institutional memory,
and that too.
Yeah.
But well, here's an interesting case. I never figured out this one. I stumbled across a video on Netflix, and the credits rolled up, and at the beginning it said this movie was funded and produced by USAID and Feed the Future. And I thought, oh boy, this is going to be boring. Turned out to be a terrific film. It was called The Gift, and it was about a young taxi conductor who has to go back to his farm because his mother died, and his father wants him to work on the farm. So a very simple script, but beautifully shot. It was shot in Kenya, but the location was supposed to be Uganda, and it was in Swahili. So these things made you question. But I went to the staff in the economic growth department, which would be the ones. So I said, have you seen this movie? It was in 2017. So the international staff hadn't heard of it, because they probably just came in. But the local staff, I figured, would know. Not anybody knew. And it wasn't a sort of thing like information is power, so I'm not going to share it. It wasn't anything like that. They literally did not know that there was a movie about Uganda. And I thought, how's that possible?
Yeah,
you have to do research, because at the end of the day, the story's message was that young people should go back to the farm, right? Now,
but the message didn't reach the person it was supposed to meet. It stopped on Netflix.
Well, you beat me to the punchline. That's the real joke of it. Who's going to watch it? But there would have been a movie premiere. This would have been a big deal. A lot of money went into it.
In schools,
it was a good movie. It would have been submitted for Cannes Film Festival. It was a good movie. So I just gave up, and every once in a while I'd ask again. I'd force people to watch it on my team. You've got to watch this.
You got to watch this
to know what it is, because it's taking a firm position on education and agriculture, and saying this is where Uganda should put its, to help with the youth bulge, right? So there had to be some research to inform it. The only place I can tell I never confirmed it is that it came from Washington. And it was done on behalf of Uganda, but in which case only the senior people would have known about it. But it just seems,
and I think this is important, because I was going through the USAID portals. I think there's a lot of data manuals.
Yes,
a lot of money has gone into consultancy to build either literature or trainings, or just generally resources that can build local capacity, but it looks like it stops on a shelf. There's very little effort in ensuring that now that we have the resources, we can ensure that people actually have the skill.
Right, and that goes back to the teach a man to fish. I hate this phrase. Teach a man to fish, give a man a fish, he'll eat for a day. Teach him to fish, he'll eat for a lifetime. So the challenge is, and I don't know which way this USAID thing is going to go. I have clients that, are implementing partners, contractors, grantee, and USAID is former employees. So hopefully this doesn't offend, but it's simply not in the self-interest of an implementing partner to put itself out of work, right?
And it's the next question we're actually going to get into.
So when it comes to capacity, right, the capacity that's given, especially in the MERL community, is technical. It's how to do this type of evaluation, that type of evaluation. But there's a lot of mistrust of the local MERL community, and they're not organized like US is. They don't have a lot of small businesses, right? They're individuals, because they didn't have this coming together of big business and a need for data efficiency, data appreciation. So that market was just never created here. It's not in most countries. So because of that, the critical elements of training, capacity building, and we call it capacity sharing, are fundraising and higher level financial management and activity management. These are skills that would reduce the anxiety for risk that USAID has, to take on more local organizations. They have to become more familiar with this. So when the localization policy came out and Samantha Power put the 25% down and the 50% down, we all had to come up with our plan at the mission. Each office had to come up with a plan. And mine was two-way learning, that local organizations need to learn how we do business, and we need to learn the local system, because COVID got us everybody working at home, right? And coming out of COVID, it was really hard to get people out of that efficiency. Well, what they thought was efficiency, to have so many meetings in a day, by video, but they're not effective. Only the ones that are pushing information out are effective. But if you're doing a team building, or you're doing a brainstorm, or you're strategizing, you have to see people. You have to look them in the face. And those types of things, they weren't efficient. So to make these things happen, you have to make localization happen, you have to get people out of the office. And I knew it, I experienced it myself. And I used to say when I was on the other side, USAID never leaves the office. They're stuck in that bubble, and I blamed them for it. I said they could get out, but it's really hard. Being there, you got to get a car, and it's like a whole day, and you're bothering a lot of people to get out to the field. And then you get out there, and there's kids everywhere, and the local government has put in a parade, and it's like, what are you going to monitor? Only the good stuff. So finding a way to get people out to the field and reduce their burden at the office, all the paperwork, because they would go out to the field and they'd be like, I've got all this paperwork back home. It's gonna take me be up all night the next day. So my focus while I was there was to reduce that burden of paperwork by eventually leveraging AI when it came around. But before that, creating these tools that we now use at the hub that will allow our partners, smallest businesses there are, to not to spend all of its overhead on the first quarterly report, right? Because of a streamlined way to do that. And that's a transparent way, and that gives USAID confidence that things are getting done. This is a
good local partner.
So as long as you do that, you bring the locals here, and you bring USAID out of its offices to meet them, it builds trust.
And they share capacity.
And some shared capacity as well. You'd be surprised what one visit to the field will do. I've seen people that went out to the field for the first time and they came back like, I cannot believe this. I saw this village that was having a problem with elephants coming in and stamping on all their produce.
Lived experiences, right?
And what they did is amazing. They put up beehives
to scare the elephants, right?
In between, so they didn't have to make a big fence and have that broken. And plus, they used the beehives to make money. It was like win-win.
Local solution.
Exactly. And I remember an old hand of USAID that'd been around for a while. She says, welcome to 20 years ago, or something like this. We've been doing this forever. So knowledge doesn't get passed around and down as much as it should, but that's the way it is with every bureaucracy.
Sure. Maybe as we close this first segment of this podcast, so I want to understand, and I think you make a comment here, which was very, very vital, that I don't think it's strategic for an agency to put itself out of work. And that begs the question on how does USAID serve U.S. strategic interests globally?
Wow, that's a compound question. In M&E, when I applied for the fellowship that eventually brought me here, there was a question that said, tell us what's wrong with this statement. It said, to measure the percentage increase in the number of participants and the percentage of impact that they've appreciated, or their appreciation of the activity. And they said, what is wrong with this indicator? And luckily, I was smart, and I said, it's a compound indicator. So you can't have two, right? So you have a compound question. So let's address one at a time. So what is it about this policy that prevents USAID from putting itself out of work, right? And I know because many proposals I wrote for clients, with all the best intentions, said, if you award this to us, our local capacity building program will be so strong that we'll effectively put ourselves out of work by year 5. I could have written that into 4 or 5 proposals. And you don't win all proposals, but
some form of expiry date, sunset clause.
Yeah, because USAID is asking for this, right? They'll send a solicitation, and to be compliant, right? And at the other side, someone's checking the box to see that you answered all of these questions in some way or another. So if you take a solicitation, you break it down, and you have a section for every compliance-related question, you're already over the page limits, right? So you have to be creative in how you address these things. So 30 pages, believe it or not, is not enough to really put forward a full solution. So, why USAID is not adhering to these promises that we made as contractors as well, with good intentions, but once you're on the ground, we were talking about NDI before this started, and National Democratic Institute has a vested interest to stay and have a presence in the country, right? For whatever countries it's in, to be a place for people to come. Maybe it's just to get a pen and a folder and a workshop on public speaking, but it's a place to come. So you would look at that and say, well, you're not building capacity. You're not putting yourself out of work. So there's some situations where USAID should be in a country for an extended period of time. But once USAID is delivering contracts where they're asking for things that are specific, right, then they should be on their way to kind of fading out of that sector. But it relies on those subcontractors, those employees to take over. And whether we like the reality or not, headquarters needs to pay staff. Those people need work to do. So if they start putting themselves out of work, they're not going to be able to pay their staff. Now it's been turned on 110%, right? So it's accelerated to a degree where a lot of small businesses will just go out of business. They can't handle this type of, which is also
a heavy reliance on USAID. Yes.
Yeah. So the system itself is what prevents USAID from ever exiting a country. We celebrated 60 years a few years ago, and I remember someone making a toast to USAID 60 years, and someone from the government saying, and to another 60 more. I didn't know who it was, but there was a groan in the audience, like, we're not supposed to be here this long.
We fix it up and go.
Exactly.
Why are you toasting to another 60?
So it's a short answer to your question is self-interest, which is how L4D built the consortium. What is your self-interest as an organization? What is our self-interest in having you as a member?
How can we call this?
Having that and being transparent about it, and not saying, we do this for the people. I don't, if somebody says that, I'm a little concerned. Yes. And my wife and I have been out of pocket to fund this initiative for a year and a half. So I can honestly say I'm one of those people that really believes in this. Unfortunately, the agency that was going to fund it is now in dire straits. But it's just this. You have to look at the self-interest. If USAID would keep using big contractors that have big staffs and big overheads, and remember a Chemonics type group, which got 12 billion, 16 billion, by far the largest contractor of all of them, because they can take $500 million of USAID money. When USAID needs to get rid of money, and the saying, if you don't spend it, you lose it.
You lose it, yes.
So Chemonics became very valuable for that. So
they knew how to...
Yeah, they knew how to spend it and spend it compliantly. But for every PEPFAR office that you'll go into that's getting $20 million, you don't see a local organization that's getting $20 million. You see a mini USAID, right? Because in order to get that $20 million, they had to become exactly that which was providing the resources. They had to spend that type of money on compliance and financial observation. So when I say we prepare local organizations to receive USAID funding, it's on a different type of compliance. I call it compliance light. And it's by changing some of the processes, like the quarterly report, right? Eliminate all the hyperbole that takes a report from 25 pages to 325 pages over the course of the grant, because it's just adding words on top of words on top of words.
Yeah.
And stripping it back to the M&E, right? That's why I became a big advocate of monitoring, evaluation, research, and learning, because let the data tell the story. And if it's wrong,
not too many words. And
yeah, so I created a word limited template, and it's only based on the data, and it was called the Deviation Monitoring Dashboard. That didn't work. People don't like deviation. nobody likes failure either, but we have to
Like
say that there's two sides of
deviation.
failure, right? If you failed to be faithful to your wife, that's a failure. If you failed to deliver to beneficiaries because you didn't consider some local context, that's a mistake, right? That we can learn from. So there's a difference in failure. Failure isn't, a monolithic term.
It isn't all the same.
Right. And there's words like fail fast. So let's not only fail, but let's find out those failures fast. So as an M&E person at USAID, I was very suspicious of any activity that had no failure, especially if it was innovative. So how is it possible?
So many reports that look too perfect to be true.
Yeah.
You're working
COVID
in
again.
some heaven.
Exactly. Like a perfect situation where everything worked. So, you just know, and when COVID hit, that's all they had to rely on were these reports. So if
because
that's all
you couldn't go on ground.
So they couldn't get on the ground.
People were throwing in anything and everything, right?
Everything was going into these reports. And so we think that these streamlined things will reduce the amount of time because local organizations don't get the same overhead that internationals do. Chemonics has what's called a NICRA. It's a rate that they've negotiated with the government, and that is not considered when the proposal is reviewed. The proposal is reviewed for the activity of the budget only, not for that extra overhead amount. But that overhead amount can be in the 40% mark, could be even higher. Whereas the local organizations until recently got 10%. So how are they supposed to compete? When you get 47%, 45%, you can hire full-time business development people. You can hire full-time M&E people. That allows you to provide those things that make USAID comfortable. But you could say in hindsight, it's a good thing that these NGOs never got the money because otherwise they'd look like the bureaucracy of USAID.
Oh, yeah.
Because any money that's being spent on paperwork is not being spent on the end user.
Ideally, it's stopping in the pipe, not getting to the actual person.
Yeah.
So about and this is the last, I think you're going to forward into the question. I think we've settled the first on how does USAID serve U.S. strategic interests globally.
That was the second one. That was tricky.
That was the second question.
That was the compound question, and probably over my head. But U.S. government's strategic interest, whether it's economic, military, or otherwise, oil, whatever the case may be, each country has its own process. I don't think I'd be the first one to tell you that the U.S. Embassy is there to get business for the American people. Primarily, that's their job, and they are staffed that way to make sure their media and their impression amongst the community, and so USAID has always complemented that. Gave the State Department something to talk about the good work that we're doing here, but what they really wanted was minerals or could be anything.
Strategic military interests.
Strategic military interests could be something. And that is what every embassy does all around the world. Your Ugandan embassy, I would hope the Ugandan embassy in America is looking out for business interests, right? And not trying to help the American people who need help in some ways, but not, I'm afraid that the Ugandan people can help. So it's just their self-interest, people's self-interest.
When you say it gives, say...
Here's the thing.
Yeah.
Except for Hillary Clinton, when she was Secretary of State, she wanted to fold the state USAID under the State Department back then. Her approach was more diplomatic. It was more in the spirit of collegial parliamentary rules. We don't have a parliament, but she followed the protocol, right? And it didn't go very far because of that, because think of it as taking a Band-Aid off of a wound, right? Hillary's approach was to peel it very slowly, and ow, and people start chipping in, and pretty soon everyone knows about it. Now, what Trump and Musk have done is just rip that Band-Aid right off. And the reason that they were successful is because of that, because they were able to just take it off with one swipe, take the name off the building. What does that mean? Take a name off of it. It doesn't mean anything. You could put it right back up there. Right?
And it's going right back up there. Right. It was politics. But
that's dispiriting. So it's the imagery of it. So how this will shake out is up to lawyers and people beyond my control. But the geopolitical interests of the U.S. will be served whether or not USAID is on its own or under State Department. I can guess if I was State Department, I wouldn't want that burden to have to.
It's too much. Yeah.
It's too much. But in a sense, it doesn't matter, because if you fold an agency that doesn't have any staff, what are you really giving to the State Department? It's just some computers and chairs. So yeah, it's USAID being out of the picture absolutely hurts USAID strategic interests, and that's why it doesn't fit. The ambassadors here, what they may say to the new government in the U.S. may be different from what they feel, but I would say most ambassadors feel like, hey, we need this USAID here to do all this HIV work so we can help the government do some of the things it needs to get done, but with our money, and everybody's happy. In Egypt, billions of dollars in military aid, to help maintain the Middle East peace. And so all of this USAID is leveraged at some point, not by USAID, but by the State Department for whatever it is. I worked in
and now they're going to lose that foothold, which means...
Well, they're going to have to become that, right? They're going to have to simultaneously provide the carrots and call back the carrots.
So eventually, USAID will crawl back into the picture, right?
It's hard to say. Yeah. There's a lot that needs to be fixed with USAID. There's a very interesting gentleman here who's received a lot of USAID funding. His name is Charles Asuba, and he leads the NGO Forum, and he's very vocal about this. Calls it the development industrial complex. I don't know if he's the first to coin the term, but when I heard it kind of fit. But it's that problem of this dichotomy of USAID wanting to do localization, but at the same time, it's preventing that by giving the money to U.S. organizations whose self-interest isn't that local groups compete with them locally. If you give local groups the capacity to fundraise and actually win a USAID award, they can win any award from any organization.
Yeah, because
if you give them the capacity for transparency and high-level financial management,
accountability, yes,
they have the trust. I was talking earlier about the trust when a USAID person comes out to the field, and the field people come to meet, and that trust increases, or that relationship builds the speed of trust, which is a very good book, which is about self-interest. The more time you spend together, the more you trust, and when you trust somebody, you can do things faster, and you can be more innovative.
And I want us in the second segment for us to forward into trying to run thought experiments about what either the future of the restructuring this global aid infrastructure will look like, and whether there will come a president who is going to bring this back. So join us in the second segment for us to have that kind of futuristic thinking about the future of USAID.
The Center for Policy Analysis is an independent think tank shaping parliamentary democracy, governance, and public policy in Uganda and beyond. Our mission is to shape public policy and strengthen democratic governance by delivering high-quality research, fostering collaboration, and empowering citizens. Our vision is a democratic society with transparent, accountable, and responsive governance systems. What sets SEPA apart? A unique consortium model that integrates expertise from diverse partners for multidisciplinary approaches. We pioneer thought leadership, leveraging tools like artificial intelligence to enhance impact. Through collaborative advocacy, we empower stakeholders to engage with legislative processes, all while combining rigorous research with a deep understanding of Uganda's political economy. Our flagship initiatives include Parliament Watch Uganda, that bridges the gap between the citizens and Parliament, the Policy Digest podcast that explores politics and public affairs across Africa, and the SEPA Convo, our bi-monthly X-Space tackling key public issues. Our work spans parliamentary democracy, human rights, public health, road safety, climate justice, artificial intelligence, and more, including the Africa Regional Conference on Parliament and Legislation. Join SEPA in shaping policies, amplifying voices, and building a democratic future. Visit www.sepa.or.ug to learn more or follow us on social media. The Center for Policy Analysis, a leading public policy think tank. Thank you for listening to the Policy Digest, a Center for Policy Analysis podcast that explores how African societies are governed and how people and their leaders are shaping the future of their communities. For more podcasts, check out our Podbean and YouTube platforms. Thank you.